Today's session, I've called it Turn HR Compliance into a Commercial Advantage. And I mean that quite literally. So this isn't a webinar about staying out of trouble. It's about turning the legal landscape, which we all know is, precarious at the moment, into like a growth strategy for consultants. So my name is Tanya Harland. I am the founder of HR Diagnostics. I've spent the best part of 20 years in HR, so 14 years of those in-house consultancy, and then 7 or 8 years in consultancy. And now I'm building a SaaS platform specifically for HR consultants. So basically everything I'm kind of sharing today, it comes from real experience, real clients, and a few kind of hard lessons along the way. So what I want to talk about really is, number one, what's happening in the employment law landscape right now and why clients are more exposed than they might even realise. Number two, so how to use that exposure as a commercial opportunity, whether that's to win new clients or whether it's to grow revenue with existing clients. And then number three is talking about how HR Diagnostics gives consultants the infrastructure to do all of that at scale and in their own brand. So we'll kick off. So the employment landscape, obviously, I could stop on this, but I won't, because we know what's happened over the last 18 months is genuinely really significant in the world of work. We're in the middle of the biggest overhaul of UK employment law in a generation. And I think the vast majority of SME employers are probably burying their head in the sand. So I've just kind of identified, well, what are those key areas, of risk at the moment? So we know the ERA 2025, this is the headline act, new rights, new duties, new exposure across the workforce. We're obviously talking about unfair dismissal, qualifying periods, flexible working, 0 hours, etc. And I think that 6 months qualifying period, that is actually a big one for businesses. It means any employee who's been in post for 6 months obviously will have unfair dismissal rights. So I think for consultants, it's about looking at how they can support clients with the recruitment process, the probation, the onboarding, the probationary, so that they're kind of minimising those risks. Another big one, trade union reform. So statutory right of access for trade unions, obviously is a big one. Employers who don't have clear recognition and access policies in place obviously will be carrying a legal risk from October onwards. For many SMEs, I think this is probably entirely off their radar, which makes it a really easy conversation for consultants to start having now. And then I think the fourth big one is AI and the technology compliance. So with the AI EU Act coming to fruition, this is going to grow fast. AI use in recruitment, performance monitoring, employee engagement, those types of things are going to, create genuine discrimination and data protection risks. So I think probably a lot of SME businesses probably don't even have an AI policy in place. So I think this is a good opportunity for consultants. And I think it's about pipeline for the consultant and knowing how to use that. So let's have a look at commercial opportunities, because I think this is the most important thing for consultants to recognise is actually there's huge amounts of opportunities for us, and money's lying on the table. If we're proactive and have the kind of infrastructure in place to be able to grab those commercial opportunities. The HR audit is actually one of the biggest. Some people call it HR health check, but that kind of language will resonate with you guys. And it's not just a compliance exercise, it's actually, a powerful revenue tool for consultants. And here's why I think it's important. So we like to grow our businesses, we want to win new clients. Most consultants lead with a proposal or a pitch. I want consultants to start thinking about leading with a diagnostics instead. So asking the right questions in the first initial conversation, questions like, when did you last review your contracts of employment? Do you have a policy, an AI policy? Have you updated your probation process since ERA 2025? There's loads of these kind of questions that are really key to understanding those risks. And I think that those kind of questions, those diagnostic questions, actually, first of all, demonstrate value before you've even quoted them, but it shows them what's happening inside their own business. And I think that's far more compelling than providing any kind of proposal, a policy update or what have you. I think it's kind of a new way of thinking. The other thing is growing revenue with existing clients. So the ERA 2025 alone gives a legitimate reason to pick up the phone and call every client that you've ever worked with, not to sell them something, but basically to flag that legal landscape shifted, and it might be worth, reviewing things, taking stock, seeing where they're at, where the risks lie currently. You could bundle annual health checks into your retainers. I know from, friends of mine who are HR consultants who say, I'm getting all these retainers each month, but I don't hear from my clients for months on end. And I feel guilty that I'm not offering them something added value. So, a real kind of cost-effective way this could be bundled into retainers, and it gives them an amazing tool to be able to, understand where they are with their compliance and give them peace of mind. So, and converting one off into, so charging what they're worth. So basically standalone digital audits. Generally, I've always charged a minimum of £500 for an audit, anywhere between 500. I probably charged up to 1,500, but consultants that have been beta pilot testing and my early adopters and that have actually charged in excess of £2,000 for an audit. So there is opportunities there to sell to every kind of client, particularly as that legal landscape is moving so fast. So yeah, it's all about kind of packaging it up, pricing it, and selling it. Okay, so winning new clients. I just wanted to kind of walk through what that actually looks like in practice. I think the theory's really helpful, but the workflows where it, brings it all to fruition. So step one, it's all about that first conversation. And I think, sometimes it feels like you've got to pitch, in that first conversation. But I think actually asking those diagnostic questions, like I say, it demonstrates your knowledge, but it also will surface anxiety in the client. Because if you're asking these questions and they say, no, I haven't got that, and you're highlighting, well, if we don't remedy this risk, this is how much it's going to cost you. This is the consequence or the impact of that. I think that's, not that we want to be causing anxiety in our clients, but, once they are feeling that anxious, they're going to be receptive to what you've got to offer. The number two, so propose the audit. So the position it as a standalone kind of fixed fee service. So low barrier for them, high value for you. I'd like to run a structured compliance review across your employment practices. It's going to take us 2 hours. You'll get a risk report. You'll get a clear picture of, where you are now. And it's going to be easy for them to say yes. You then run that assessment with them. So this is where instead of spending hours of manual time on spreadsheets or Word documents, I mean, my Word document template was like 20 pages long and it was a bit painful to have to go through. But, instead of kind of doing it all manually, HR Diagnostics actually delivers that in a structured risk scored assessment across 9 employment areas. So from the client's perspective, it's going to look professional, it's going to look thorough, and it's all in your brand. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Step 4 is about presenting those findings. So the report does the heavy lifting here. So it's dynamic for the client. They see their own compliance gaps, which are evidence scored, mapped, real world insights. So, say, for example, they're scoring low on the Equality Act. So they've not got kind of provisions in place for the Equality Act. Well, here are the real world insights. Did you know that, 2023, 2024 tribunal costs, there was a payout for 1.7 million for disability discrimination. So within the risk report, there's actually kind of real world findings to highlight, okay, so the chances of that happening to you are very slim, but it does happen. And then I think it's about proposing that solution. So every gap creates a recommendation that you can provide to the client. So, and then every recommendation creates a piece of work for you. So whether that's a policy update, a contract review, a manager training program, an ongoing retainer, that audit has already made the case for you. And really that results then in the client can see the problem and you're able to provide that solution. So I just think it's probably a less of a hard sell, because actually the kind of the radial graph that they'll see, you know, with all the different percentages speaks for itself. Okay, so HR diagnostics. So just talk about HR diagnostics a little bit here. So in simplistic terms, it's a white labeled SaaS platform and it's built exclusively for HR consultants. So it's not built direct to market. The only way businesses can access the portal is via a HR consultant. And it's basically a really quick way of being able to run HR audits for clients. It's branded as your own, so your own logo, your own primary colours, your own landing page, your own, narrative, so that the client sees it as yours. It's powered by Diagnostics, but it's branded as the actual consultants. I like models, so I like to kind of understand things in kind of a logical way. So I've created a 4-pillar model here, just to keep it simplistic. So number one is about assessing the risk. So that's the actual questioning across 9 employment law areas. You basically can work that through that. There are it's all in bite-sized manageable chunks. You know, you can resume, retake, it saves, it's quite user-friendly. And so that's the first part of the process, is all about assessing where are you at now. Then the second part of the process is about identifying. So all the questions are risk based, so it's risk weighted, and there's 3 different bands. One is like your legal kind of critical areas where, you know, if they're not compliant in a certain area, there could be huge financial consequences or even criminal risks. We've then got kind of like the band 2, which is like your legal must-haves. You need to be compliant, but perhaps not those huge financial risks. And then we've got our band 3, which is like our best practice questions. So everything is kind of risk weighted because no 2 risks are the same. And then the third part of the process is the evaluate. So this is the bit where they get a risk report with those real world insights. And the remedy bit, this is the call to action for the consultant. So inbuilt into it is a action plan with specific tasks that the consultant can kind of build a 30, 60, 90, 120 day roadmap with the client to remedy those risks. And then there's knowledge hub resources as well, linked directly to those findings. So basically every gap, has the recommended next steps. And many of those next steps are the billable work you'll be doing for the next 3 to 6 months. So I mentioned about 9 employment areas. So we had 8 until recently, and employee relations is our new category that's been built with myself and a working group of consultants and an employment lawyer. And that's basically addressing all of those ERA 2025 requirements. So 9 key areas. It covers everything that an employer has an obligation to their employees. And I think the vast majority of employment tribunal exposures, it's going to be identified here and reduced here. Sorry. Oops. Okay. So, consultant toolkit. One more thing I want to cover before I get into perhaps some revenue numbers about how HR diagnostics can generate additional income. So I would say HR diagnostics, it doesn't sit in isolation. It's part of a broader suite of tools available, through Hireful. And it's Hireful, Breathe, Sensei, and it's part of that kind of ecosystem. So there are 4 components, and together they kind of cover that full client life cycle. So the talent acquisition bit, the Hireful bit, so that's about helping your clients attract and hire the right people, and because the compliance conversation often starts at the recruitment stage. And if the hiring process is flawed, then everything downstream is going to be at risk. And then it's about kind of like the HR audit part and surfacing those risks, evidencing your value, generating that ongoing advisory work. And then it's all about the HR information system. So the software that keeps the employee records, the leave, the day-to-day people management clean and compliant. And that's kind of the operational infrastructure that sits underneath good HR practices. And then I think another important part of that ecosystem is that learning and development piece. So the online training that turns compliance knowledge into demonstrable competence across the workforce. So yeah, I think HR diagnostics doesn't sit in isolation. It's kind of part of a wider suite of, as part of that toolkit. So I thought it's really important to kind of show some figures, talk about like particularly existing clients, because in my experience, they are the most underserved opportunity that most consultants actually have. You've already built relationships with those clients. You understand their business, they trust you, and the audit is just a mechanism for deepening that. And here's kind of how I see this playing out into 4 different ways. So obviously, annual compliance review. I think with the way ERA 2025 is evolving, legislative changes are happening, it's about kind of bundling that potentially into every retainer that you've got. So as a standard deliverable, it gives a guaranteed structured touch point, a reason to meet with them quarterly rather than reactively. I think the ERA 2025 is, like I say, a really important time for every client you've ever worked with to do an audit with, because they're going to have new exposure, new risks. This is like a warm call, really. It's not going to be a cold pitch. It's a warm call with those compelling reasons. You could be saying the legislative landscape has shifted significantly. I'd like to run a quick health check with you, make sure that you're covered. Most clients are going to be saying yes to that. Standard health checks offered at a fixed fee, typically anywhere between 500 and 1,500, 2,000, as a gateway to those more deeper advisory work. So low barrier to entry, but high potential upside. And that board level risk report, this one changes the conversation entirely, because when you frame the audit output as a governance tool, something the MD or the CEO should be across anyway, you're suddenly talking to a different audience at a different level with a different budget. And you're not the HR consultant anymore, you're actually their strategic risk advisor. So talking about some numbers, because I think it's really important to understand a return on investment. And there is a return on investment calculator on the HR Diagnostics website where you could punch figures in to kind of work out, what you potentially could generate in return on investment. So if we take, say, 5 existing clients and you decide to do an ERA 2025 re-audit using HR Diagnostics, should be charging, I've put 750 there. It's quite a conservative figure, but anywhere between 500 and 1,000. That will generate 3,000. That will cost you 3,750. So from those warm calls you already have, if you convert 3 of those into retainers, for example, at £500 a month, you're looking at £18,000 a year in new reoccurring revenue. And I think that's quite a conservative model. Used well, the audit doesn't just retain those clients, but it deepens that relationship, because it gives you an opportunity to say, right, let's have a quarterly review, so see where we're at, which area, what new legislation's come into effect, what can we do to upsell some of our services to kind of expand your offering, but at the same time meeting those clients' needs and minimizing their risk as much as possible. So that's just kind of one example. I think what I'm noticing or I'm realizing from HR consultants who are using HR diagnostics is that actually it's the opportunities to upsell once the client has actually completed the assessment and they can see in black and white, here this is what I need to do in order to remedy those risks that we've identified, and I think that's really where there's huge opportunities for the consultant. So, right, I just want to bring this all together now, and I want to leave you with three things I really want you to take away from today. So, number one, the HR audit or HR health check is the value, not the report, not the recommendations. The act of doing the audit itself, structured, evidenced, risk scored, that's where the value's really created. It surfaces risks, builds the trust, creates a really clear pathway roadmap for you to be able to move on to the next piece of work that you can generate with a client. And it's not having a hard sell, which I think I personally have really struggled. I've been consulting now for 6, 7 years, and the one thing I really struggle with is selling. I'm not a salesperson. I don't like to associate myself as a salesperson. But what I think I like about having a tool like this and like Hireful and Breathe HR and Training Sensei is that actually it gives me an opportunity to showcase you've got this problem and I can provide you with this tech solution, and it makes it so much easier to be able to solution sell rather than kind of hard sell. I think number two, key takeaway, stop selling, start showing. So when clients see their own compliance gaps in black and white, the real employment law consequences attached to them, they act at that point. So you're not having to persuade them. The data does it for you, particularly the radial graph on HR Diagnostics is visually, very clear and very evidence-based. So your job is to facilitate that insight, not manufacture the urgency. And number three, this is how you grow. So new clients through the audit first approach, deeper retainers through re-audits and annual health checks, reoccurring revenue through ongoing advisory work that flows naturally from those findings. And I think the important thing here is the audit is the engine. And it's something that I think every single business in the UK should be going through. HR Diagnostics is a vehicle for that. So yeah, I think if any of that resonates with anybody, feel free to book a 30-minute call and I can walk through in more detail, more granular basis, how HR Diagnostics might fit for your specific consultancy. So feel free to book a call. Any questions at this point?
That was great. Really good for me to see as well. Really good for me to see. Julie, what's your thoughts?
My thoughts are really, really good, and actually can see this working. Now, what was the question I had? I had a question and it's gone. Is there a chance to see a copy of an audit?
Yeah. So when you say
what that looks like.
Yeah, so I would suggest booking like a 30-minute Calendly meeting with me, and then I can actually demo it for you. So I can show you the process because there's two portals. One is the consultant portal, which is like the control center for the consultant to invite clients. They can toggle. We just had a new feature implemented where they can kind of choose which features they want the client to see and when they want them to see it. So if you wanted to kind of do an assessment with them, you could turn off all the risk report, the action plan, the knowledge hub, and then you could upsell that. So I think definitely a demo would be great, and we can do that in half an hour. So, and then I can share the risk report as an example for you. Yeah.
Fantastic. And just have a look at the website. You've got on the growth plan, there's 5 client licenses, but I'm presuming you can just keep increasing them as and when.
Yeah, so shall I just share the pricing page?
Yeah, please. Yeah. I think especially for the recording, I think it will be good for people to understand setup time. For us, the consultants want to know how much time they have to invest from a training perspective and what that looks like and how much it's going to cost them. So, from a recording perspective, I think that's really good to just for me and others to understand. So I
Yeah.
loved the section, and I know I encouraged by saying, look, okay, it's obviously how it's another revenue income stream for the partners or for the
Yeah.
consultants, but you know, what does that look like, sort of heavy lifting from them? So that would be really good if you could, Tanya.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, right. I'm going to start sharing a different screen. Okay. Oh, I'm not used to Teams. I use Google Meet.
So there is if you go to the very top where the
Yeah,
leave button is, next to it there's a share screen.
yeah. And
You just hit on
then
that, and then it will give you the screens. If you've got more than one, then you choose which one.
okay, so I think I've just shared that. I'm just going to
You
move
can now
over.
see your desktop.
Yeah.
Plans and pricing is now about to come up. There we go.
Amazing. Okay, right. I'm just going to zoom into that because I know with my wide screen it does look a bit small sometimes. So I mentioned about that return on investment calculator. Just briefly show you, this is a way that you can kind of go, right, I've purchased 5 licenses. You put in what your hourly rate is normally, how many audits per client per year, because I'll show you in a minute, it's interchangeable. So it's a good way of just kind of number crunching and getting a bit of an idea, playing with the numbers. In terms of the pricing, there are 3 packages. The starter is the £49 a month, excluding VAT, and that's one, you can use that with one client. You get the fully branded like white label platform, the toolkit, so all the features, but it's one client, and that client isn't interchangeable. So what that means is it's £49 a month for a 12-month minimum contract for HR consultants. So as long as they do a minimum of 12 months on whatever package, it's then a rolling month by month basis. So £49 a month, one license. The professional package is £99 a month, and that's 3 client licenses, but those are interchangeable. So, for example, you do an audit for 3 existing clients, and you complete implementing and getting them 100% compliant within 3 months. You can interchange those. So if you're savvy and proactive, you could actually interchange probably quite a number of times and get, for £99 a month, you could probably service 15 clients in that year. And with that, there's an additional complimentary license. So you can test that before you go on the client journey. That's not available on the starter. Videos and kind of PDF guide and stuff like that are. There's also kind of like monthly networking events, which are great because consultants are sharing, well, this is what I've done, perhaps, re-looking at how they market it. And then there'll be like a quarterly strategy webinar. The growth plan is the 5 interchangeable. So this is where you start off with 5. I think if you've got a consultancy business already with quite a number of clients, you can interchange those 15 clients throughout, whenever you like, really. And that gets obviously all of those features, but also what I'm looking to do is market this to businesses that don't have an HR consultant in place, that can be serviced by an HR consultant. So the growth one, whilst there's no kind of featured partner directory at the moment, because HR Diagnostics only launched in January, there will be a featured partner directory. So there's potential lead generation from that as well. And with the growth one, you're able to add additional licenses. So if you've got more than 5 clients on the go where you're doing audits at the same time, then you can buy the additional ones. So that's the packages.
Thank you.
And then your other question was about time. So if you don't mind, I might just show you the client portal very quickly. I know we don't want to do a demo, but I think this is probably quite useful just because of the question you've asked. Okay, so these have been timed and tested. So these are our 9 categories, and it tells you exactly before you start a category how many subcategories there are and how long it's likely to take you to complete that specific category. So, for example, the pay and benefits, statutory time off, essential HR policies, those are quick ones. They shouldn't take any more than 5 minutes. The longer ones are like your contractual rights, your recruitment, dignity, respect, employee relations ones. So the user can start them in any order. If they leave it, it automatically saves. They can resume, retake, etc. But it gives them a bit of an idea. Now, there's a caveat to that. So so there's different ways an HR consultants are using this. So some HR consultants are selling it direct to their HR in-house HR person, and they're not getting involved because they've got somebody in the business who's able to answer all those questions.
Mhm.
Other consultants, most of the consultants actually are completing this in collaboration with the client. So they sit on a Zoom call or Teams call,
Yeah.
and they'll go through those questions. Now, that's probably going to be more time efficient than if you're sending it to the client, who's then got to think, well, I don't know if I understand that question. Every question, I'll just give you an example. If we retake this particular section, every question has an information button to explain what that question means. So I would say, whilst these are times allocated or tested, they are with the HR consultant who is knowledgeable. I would
Yeah.
say if there's a client completing it, there's going to be longer.
Yeah.
But there's a whole wealth of toolkits in terms of like pre-audit checklists, so getting all your documents ready before you start the audit, and that's going to save time. So yeah, in total, I would say an hour and a half, 2 hours max.
Okay.
Yeah.
Per client.
Per client, yeah. And I think there's so many different ways that consultants are using this. Some are using it as like a totally hand holding,
Yeah.
and that's like requiring a lot more of their time, and they're charging their hourly rate for that.
Yeah.
Other consultants, I had one beta pilot tester. She sent the audit for her client to complete, charged them £500. They completed it, and then she just spent an hour going through the risk report afterwards. So I think it's very much dependent on the client's level of awareness and knowledge about all of these areas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
Julie, any
Yeah.
other questions?
I don't think so. I think having a look through doing the one-to-one with you and the call, I think would be really helpful.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll share my Calendly link.
Yeah.
When I was talking just then, did you see that screen where I've put oh no. Okay.
I
Right.
wasn't sure, and I didn't want to interrupt you either, because I was like, okay, we're just chatting. That's fine.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Gosh, I should. Oh, so you can see it now.
We can.
And it basically shows with each of those 9 categories how many assignments there are, or subcategories,
Perfect.
how many minutes it will take to complete.
But all of this is in your website, Tanya, so people can, it's in the public domain, people can go and do their own research, their own digging, their own sort of areas before they need to book in a call. So that's all out there, which is great for people to view before they then decide to book in the call with you.
Yeah,